Trade tensions between Canada and the United States are once again reaching a boiling point. Tariffs, counter-tariffs, and economic retaliation have defined the latest standoff between these two longtime trade partners. But now a new flashpoint has emerged, one that could have serious economic, political, and even strategic consequences: Alaska. Could Canada actually cut off U.S. access to its northernmost state? And if it did, how would the U.S. respond? Stay with us as we break down one of the most critical phases in U.S.-Canada trade relations. The conflict began with the Trump administration's decision to impose tariffs on Canadian dairy and lumber. This was part of a broader effort to pressure Canada into trade concessions. However, Canada was not willing to sit back and take the economic hit. In response, reports suggest that British Columbia is now considering imposing additional costs on American trucks passing through its territory, the only land route to Alaska. The Alaska Beacon was among the first to report on this development, stating that British Columbia's leader has proposed new route fees, or tolls, specifically targeting American commercial shipments heading north. Shortly after, Newsweek and other major outlets confirmed these reports. Could this lead to a full-scale economic standoff? What would the consequences be for both nations? And most importantly, would Canada really go through with such a move? Alaska is a unique part of the United States. It is separated from the mainland by thousands of kilometers, making overland travel to the state nearly impossible without passing through Canada. The state is heavily reliant on imports from the lower 48 states, and most of those imports travel by road through British Columbia. Everything from fuel to food, construction materials to essential supplies passes through Canadian territory before reaching Alaska. If British Columbia follows through with its plan to tax or restrict this transit route, the economic impact could be devastating, not just for Alaska, but for American businesses that depend on trade with the state. Would Canada really risk triggering an economic crisis just to retaliate against U.S. tariffs? Canadian officials have been clear. They will not back down in the face of economic pressure from Washington. In response to Trump's trade policies, Ottawa has warned that it is prepared to take drastic action, with British Columbia leading the charge. The provincial government has suggested that additional tolls and transit fees could be applied to American trucks heading to Alaska. On the U.S. side, the Trump administration has signaled that any move by Canada to restrict American access to Alaska would be met with swift retaliation. Washington could impose new tariffs on Canadian industries, particularly energy, agriculture, and manufacturing, sectors that are heavily reliant on U.S. markets. But would such retaliatory measures be enough to deter Canada from following through with its threats? The stakes in this conflict are incredibly high. If British Columbia moves forward with restrictions on Alaska-bound trade, the immediate impact would be felt by American businesses and consumers. The cost of goods in Alaska, already high due to its remote location, could skyrocket as a result of additional transit fees. Everyday necessities like groceries, fuel, and medical supplies could become prohibitively expensive, creating hardship for Alaskan residents. With limited alternative routes, companies might be forced to increase prices, passing the burden on to consumers. Industries such as fishing, oil production, and tourism would also be affected. Alaska's economy depends on an efficient supply chain, and any disruption to that chain could have ripple effects throughout the region. The fishing industry, which exports large quantities of seafood to the lower 48 states, relies on seamless transportation networks to maintain freshness and efficiency. If delays occur due to tariffs or increased inspections, the economic toll could be substantial. Oil production, another pillar of Alaska's economy, relies on the timely transport of equipment, workforce supplies, and refined products. Even minor delays could disrupt production schedules, impacting both the local economy and the broader U.S. energy sector. And then, there's the issue of military logistics. Alaska is home to key U.S. military infrastructure, including air bases, missile defense systems, and naval operations. The state plays a critical role in America's defense strategy, especially in Arctic security and Pacific operations. If Canada were to impose restrictions on transit routes, it could even impact military supply chains. The U.S. government would likely see this as more than just an economic dispute. It could escalate into a national security concern. Would Washington tolerate such interference in national security matters? The pressure on both sides to reach a resolution would be immense, as neither country can afford the potential consequences of a prolonged standoff. While this standoff is primarily economic, the political implications cannot be ignored. The U.S. and Canada have long been allies, but tensions have risen in recent years over trade disputes. Could this issue escalate into a full-blown trade war? Trump's critics argue that his aggressive tariff policies are backfiring, alienating key allies and putting American businesses at risk. Meanwhile, some Canadian officials believe that blocking access to Alaska is a necessary countermeasure to defend national economic interests. But is this a real threat, or just a negotiating tactic? Trade agreements such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, and its successor, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, were designed to prevent exactly this type of conflict. Under these agreements, both countries have obligations to maintain open trade routes and fair economic policies. However, disputes over tariffs and transit rights have persisted despite these frameworks. Would British Columbia's decision to impose fees on Alaska-bound shipments violate USMCA? And if so, could Washington take legal action to force Canada to comply? Some analysts believe that this dispute is less about tariffs and more about power dynamics. By threatening to restrict U.S. access to Alaska, Canada is sending a message that it will not be bullied into trade concessions. But at the same time, Canada is also relying on U.S. trade. Any move that escalates tensions could backfire, harming Canadian businesses just as much as American ones. Ultimately, this situation may come down to one key question: who will blink first? So, what do you think? Will Canada actually follow through with its threats to impose new tariffs on Alaska-bound trade? Or is this all just political posturing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into global affairs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.